Critiques of Israeli politics can be perceived by some as criticism of Judaism or an attack on Jewish people, leading to charges of anti-Semitism. The conflation can shut down discussions and create an atmosphere of fear or hesitation around expressing viewpoints on Israel.
So like a curious traveler on a quest, we embark upon a journey of information. Stay with us for a ride into knowledge.
So why can't we state the obvious? Why can't we call a spade a spade?
That's just propaganda as well. Because now they just say, if you don't support Israel, you're an anti-Semite. If you cover the war in the Gaza Strip, you're an anti-Semite. So it's really just anything. Now it's just become any news that Israel doesn't want you to see. They just say it's anti-Semitic, and then they censor it.
Now, normally it's acceptable to criticize a country, but the extent of the severity of criticism of Israel is greater than any other country with far worse human rights records. Many think a person can't avoid thinking there is something more behind it than simple criticism. Now look at the UN resolutions. From 2015 through 2022, the UN has adopted 144 resolutions on Israel and only 68 on all other countries in the world. North Korea put people in camps or snatches them up with no warning. Afghanistan forbids women to go to school. Saudi Arabia executes prisoners with no warning. Russia, and Israel needs more resolutions. Going to give you a bit of history on the subject, adapted from the work of Oren Shani, who works at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Now here's some of his work.
In 1831, Muhammad Ali Pasha, the governor of Egypt on behalf of the Ottoman Empire, rebelled against the empire. He and his son, Ibrahim Pasha, assembled an army and took not only over Egypt, but also over the entire Levant. During the 10 years he was in power, Ali Pasha settled some 30,000 people from Egypt and Sudan in the Levant, especially along the coastline, allowing them to own their small piece of land. He encouraged those farmers, as he did inside Egypt, to adopt modern cores like cotton and citrus fruits and modern agricultural methods and tools. In fact, the first step in the turning of the Levant from a neglected and desolated corner of the Ottoman Empire into a much more developed area was done by Ali Pasha. Unfortunately, the idea of a strong and independent Egypt didn't fit well with the interests of the European superpowers. So in 1841, they helped the Ottomans to kick Ali Pasha out and regain control of the Levant. The Ottomans had to pay a price, though. Egypt itself became, in fact, under British control, and the Ottomans were forced to make great reforms in the way they managed their empire. Part of these reforms was what is known as the tapu. That's a word that everyone in Israel knows in its Arabic mispronunciation, taboo. The tapu is a land ownership arrangement that makes it virtually impossible to privately own small pieces of land. Once the tapu arrangement was implemented by the Ottomans, farmers were forced to sell their small patches of land to rich land barons that were known as effendis, and so a feudal system was formed. And then a process started where very large areas of the Levant were sold to people from outside of the Ottoman Empire. This was supposed to be forbidden by the tapu, but in the Ottoman Empire everything was possible, with the help of some bakshish, the Turkish word for bribery. At first, most of these foreign land buyers were not Jewish. In fact, the few first Jewish land buyers at that time were residents of the Ottoman Empire who took advantage of the fact that land ownership was no longer restricted to Muslims. So, most of the foreigners who bought land in the Levant were Christian Europeans, and most notably, Germans from the Templar movement. In any case, the result of this process was that many peasants that were literally sold with the land they were living on, feudalism, remember, were either expelled or had to live in terms of almost slavery. That was the 19th century. Colonialism was at its peak, and not many people thought there was anything wrong with that situation. So they began to incite the population against the Jews and against the British mandate. This resulted in a series of revolts, which gradually caused the British to turn back on the promises that they made during the World War. Now, while it was very clear that they were turning back on their promises to the Jewish population, in fact, they were turning back on their promises to the Arab population too, by giving almost 2/3 of Palestine to the Hashemite dynasty, an area that became the Kingdom of Jordan, and by bringing in large number of labor immigrants from Haran, the southwest part of Syria, and from Iraq. And with this state of chaos, the world entered the Second World War, and I think it is needless to explain why, after the war and the Holocaust, there was no chance of things not ending up in a bloody and prolonged conflict. At one hand, you have millions of Jews now desperate to establish the Jewish state as the only mean to recover from their great disaster, and at the other hand, hundreds of thousands of Palestinian Arabs, most of them still in fact peasants with no property and status, for which the newly created Arab states couldn't care less. Their plan for Palestine was to conquer it and divide it between them, and when Israel won its independence war against all odds, the Arabs had no intention to assimilate the Palestinian refugees into their own population or help them the only way.
They still don't. The only place in the region where there is any sense of remorse about what happened and any political debate about how this conflict can be resolved is in Israel. And that, after all, is the essence of the problem today. Just more food for thought.
Thanks for watching this and all our videos. Please like, share, and subscribe. And until we meet again, stay curious, fellow travelers, and have a great day.